Hola and welcome back. I am excited to introduce our first live session of the day as we start to ramp up the conversation around ambition and create a cohesive call to action on placing nature at the heart of our green recovery and sustainable development plans. Don't be surprised if you see a few familiar faces in here. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce this next session, a global response to our planetary emergency, protecting our safety net, featuring the Leaders Pledge for Nature, united to reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 for sustainable development. We hope you enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. My name is Musonda Mumba, and I'm the chair of the Global Partnership for Forest and Landscape Restoration. Welcome to this Global Ambition Day. So excited to be your master of ceremony, or is it mistress of ceremony, whichever way, but this is a very exciting and very important event because this event is the Leaders Pledge for Nature and People. So what is going on? The reality is that we're in the middle of a planetary emergency. And it's so great to have this important session where, we're seeing this ambitious and global signal from leaders to say, mostly heads of state and governments, to say that they have to support the UN Summit on Biodiversity, which is going to be taking place in the next 2 days on September 30th. But for this particular event, we have the actual hosts of this event are AOSIS, Belize, Bhutan, Colombia, Finland, Kenya, Seychelles, UK, the EU, the European Union, and the partners are United Nations Environment Programme, WWF, the World Conservation Organization, and also UNDP, together with Global Commons Alliance and the Planetary Emergency Partnership. Now, here's what's happening. What we have seen in the last week is that there's so much going on. We have seen from the Living Planet Index report, which you're going to see a video of, that there is a massive decline in our biodiversity on this planet, a dangerous path that we've entered within this planetary emergency. And this is really culminating on reports such as the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, really telling us that we are in danger collectively. And what is very interesting, as we've seen from the fires in California and also from this pandemic called COVID-19, is that these particular emergencies are no respecter of political nor geographical boundaries. And so we are all interconnected. And so we're encouraged to see that this 75th United Nations General Assembly, which is happening right now on this parallel process, has made a declaration putting and protecting our planet center. And really on moving forward, the United Nations is saying we have to work together. So well over 100 governments are committing to this and will be present at the UN Summit on Biodiversity. So today we're going to hear about this Leaders Pledge, which is really exciting. And we're all very excited to see well over 65 heads of state and government pledging for nature and the planet. But before we go ahead, I know that you're tweeting, you're hashtagging away, and you're telling your family and friends about this particular event. I just want to say the hashtags are very clear and you can see them right there scrolling over, and we have several hashtags that you can take over. But without further ado, I just want to say, please promote this website, which is leaderspledgefornature.org, and you can see it on that live stream. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce His Excellency, Mr. Volkan Bokcia, who is President of the United Nations Secretary of the General Assembly. And right after him will be a video message from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. Over to you, sir.
Excellencies, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you today. I will be brief. As an international community, we have not lived up to our ideals or commitments on biodiversity. In fact, none of the 20 targets agreed by member states in Aichi, Japan, a decade ago, have been fully achieved. Words and good intentions are clearly not enough. They will not clean the oceans, save elephants, or prevent deforestation. Only our actions can do that, and we know this can work. A study released only 2 weeks ago noted that since 1993, and with the Convention on Biodiversity, Up to 4 dozen animal species have been saved. This was done with local, national, and international action and included habitat protection, species reintroduction, and legal protections, amongst other efforts. This demonstrates that we can deliver. So let us be inspired by these positive developments. Let us lean into these successes and build upon them. In 2 days, I will preside over the UN's first Biodiversity Summit. It is my strong hope and wish that this summit will elevate the political discourse on biodiversity and be an important first step on the road to COP15. Let this be the moment that we agree to act decisively, compassionately, and pragmatically to protect the world in which we live. Thank you very much.
We'll now have a live video from His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres.
Excellencies, colleagues, a planetary emergency is upon us. Driven by the dual threats of the climate crisis and biodiversity collapse, this emergency is threatening people and planet. We are at war with nature, and nature is fighting back. Biodiversity disasters are underway even as we speak. Oil spills are devastating marine ecosystems. Deforestation and forest fires are killing people and destroying habitats with incalculable economic costs. Even the COVID-19 pandemic speaks to our dysfunctional relationship with nature. We have failed to meet any of the biodiversity targets that were set in Japan 10 years ago. Progress on almost half is described as poor. The problems include significant funding shortfalls and the lack of monitoring tools. But the main issue, as always, is lack of political will. We need to find a better way. We need a new global biodiversity framework that addresses the drivers of biodiversity loss and provides a roadmap for implementation. And we need to scale up nature-based solutions like the Great Green Wall across sub-Saharan Africa, which provides natural protection against natural disasters while capturing carbon emissions and creating decent jobs. This makes sense for our planet and our economies. From fisheries to tourism, over 1 billion jobs are linked with nature. I commend the ambitious governments participating today that are calling for 30% of land and marine resources to be protected by 2030. I thank you all for taking this leadership further by launching the Leaders' Pledge for Nature. We urgently need to raise our ambition in the vital months between this week's Biodiversity Summit and COP15 next May in Kunming. I count on all leaders, government and private sector alike, to make decisive commitments to protect our planet and all life on it. Let's make next year, 2021, into Nature Year. The year when we change course and start rebuilding the beauty and bounty of our world. Thank you.
Important and very clear message from the UN Secretary General. Right now, I'd like to introduce Marco Lambertini, who is the Director General of WWF, who's also going to be giving us a video message and really talking about this decline in nature and the biodiversity that we so depend on.
Science has never been clearer. We are losing nature and biodiversity at a shocking and dangerous rate. Last year, IPBES report spoke of 1 million species driven to extinction. This year, WWF Living Planet report of 2/3 decline in global wildlife populations in less than 50 years. And the Global Biodiversity Outlook of the Convention on Biological Diversity highlights that none of the biodiversity targets will be fully met by 2020. But we know we can solve the nature crisis. We must protect more natural habitats, at least 30% on land and in the ocean, through governments, communities, indigenous people. We must curb wildlife trade and overfishing, and we must green the key economic sectors driving nature loss today, particularly achieving deforestation-free agriculture. Today's Leaders' Pledge for Nature calls upon governments and businesses to reverse nature loss by 2030. Let's build on this commitment during the negotiations next year on climate and biodiversity and agree on a plan that sets us on a course to achieve true sustainable development for a carbon neutral, nature positive, equitable society. There's never been a more crucial time to act for nature and people, and that time is now.
A very clear message there from the Living Planet Index report, as you've heard from Marco Lambertini. Now, this next gentleman requires no introduction, Sir David Attenborough, who is actually going to be also streaming in through a video message to really tell us and send this message very loud and clear to the global leadership that we have a decline in our natural world of all the species that we very much depend on. So he is actually in the middle of finalizing, if he hasn't actually finalized, a very exciting and interesting film that's going to be launching on the 4th of October on Netflix. Look out for it. It's entitled A Life on Our Planet. Sir David Attenborough.
I've witnessed the natural world at its most fascinating and vibrant. But I've also witnessed startling changes that are today threatening our very civilizations. The only conditions modern humans have ever known are changing and changing fast. You are all in positions where you can make more of a difference than most. If ever we needed a strong signal from world leaders, from people like you, that we're going to solve this, it is now. The living world is a unique and spectacular marvel. Billions of individuals of millions of kinds of plants and animals, dazzling in their variety and richness, working together to benefit from the energy of the sun and the minerals of the earth. Leading lives that interlock in such a way that they sustain each other. We rely entirely on this finely tuned life support machine. And it relies on its biodiversity to run smoothly. Yet the way we humans live on Earth now is sending biodiversity into a decline. The natural world is fading. The evidence is all around. It's happened in my lifetime. I've seen it with my own eyes. This film is my witness statement and my vision for the future. The story of how we came to make this our greatest mistake, and how, if we act now, we can yet put it right.
There we have it, this lifeline, this machine, this breathing, pulsating space that we so depend on. How do we take care of it? How do we put things right? This next session, we're going to hear from leaders who have responded to a call to action and other multiple calls from youth voices, faith leaders, and also from cities, businesses, civil society organizations, indigenous peoples, many calling for urgent action as we can go forward on how we take care of planet Earth. I'd like to say that we're now lightning rounds, we're going to be having this round of statements from heads of state and governments, and also from non-state leaders within this main theme that is focusing on how do we actually unite for more nature by 2030 to protect people and the planet. We're going to have leaders from the governments of the Republic of Marshall Islands and the Austrian government, Bolivia, Seychelles, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Hungary, Panama, Peru, and followed by leaders from Danone, Care International, Faith Invest, Japao Indigenous Association, and the World Health Organization. And here we go.
On behalf of the European Union, I'm proud to commit to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, together with many other heads of state and government. We commit to undertake the 10 actions to put our planet on a path to recovery. We want to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation. We must do so for our prosperity and for our health, to protect livelihoods and fight hunger, and to become carbon neutral. All parts of government must take on this challenge together, jointly with citizens, with industry and businesses, with farmers and fishermen and women. We want a real common movement for change, one that crosses borders and unites generations. Now is the time to act.
Hablo con orgullo desde uno de los países más megadiversos del mundo, con la segunda mayor biodiversidad por kilómetro cuadrado que tiene nuestro planeta, donde están el 50% de los páramos de todo el orbe. Colombia y el mundo entero enfrenta una pérdida de biodiversidad y servicios ecosistémicos que pone en riesgo nuestra supervivencia como especie. Tenemos que aprovechar la oportunidad de avanzar hacia los caminos sostenibles para nuestro bienestar. El primer paso es reconocer la interdependencia entre la naturaleza y las personas. Un avance es la declaración de líderes voluntarios que adoptamos hoy y que es un hito en el proceso de definir el marco de biodiversidad después del año 2020. Para continuar unidos en estos propósitos, Colombia los invita en el año 2021 a la PRECOP del Convenio de Diversidad Biológica. Es hora de demostrar nuestra capacidad para cambiar tendencias negativas apoyadas por el multilateralismo y para salir de la crisis de la pandemia como una mejor sociedad. Los invito a que estén con nosotros en Colombia, un país que defiende la biodiversidad. Muchísimas gracias.
I take this opportunity to join my fellow co-hosts in welcoming you all to the Leaders Event for Nature and People, a global response to our planetary emergency. It is known that we will only be able to tackle the interrelated people and nature crisis through concerted actions from governments, businesses, and civil society. As we look forward to ushering in the decade for ecosystem restoration, we must recognize this interconnectedness and set nature on the right path of zero biodiversity loss and promote greener and much more sustainable practices. The ambition that the world's political leadership is showing today is a strong indication that we need to do business differently and therefore place sustainability at the core of our societies and economies. We need and we must reset our relationship with nature and secure a resilient, carbon neutral, nature positive world, and therefore ensure the green recovery agenda is on top of our priorities. And it is for this reason that Kenya is proud to endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature as a sign of our steadfast commitment to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and put nature and our ecosystems on a path to its recovery by 2030. I thank you all.
Yagwe and greetings from the Republic of the Marshall Islands. As a vast island nation, which is more than 99% water, we are proud stewards of some of the world's richest marine biodiversity. I proudly join other leaders in calling for urgent, practical, and ambitious action to address biodiversity loss by 2030, including through robust goals and strong monitoring mechanisms. No one nation or leader can effectively address global problems alone. Working together, we can ensure that future generations will know our wealth of biodiversity.
Excellencies, dear friends, Austria is known around the world for its beautiful landscapes, alpine environment, and diverse nature. However, we too are observing the effects of the overexploitation of natural resources, of unsustainable habits, and of the global climate crisis. And we are feeling every day the devastating impact of these factors on our ecosystems. Our planet is in a state of emergency. Let us seize the opportunity of this year's commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and of the first ever UN Summit on Biodiversity to reverse that trend. Let us work together towards a future in which we live in harmony with nature. We owe it to our planet and to our future generations.
Señoras y señores, jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, damas y caballeros, el informe Planeta Vivo 2020 nos sobrecoge con datos sobre la pérdida de la biodiversidad en el mundo y en particular en América Latina. Preservar la biodiversidad es una inversión estratégica para la salud y la seguridad alimentaria, para la economía y para el desarrollo de nuestros países. Estamos aún a tiempo de revertir la espiral de destrucción biológica en que vivimos, adoptando medidas urgentes en base a los conocimientos científicos y en base a la experiencia y tradiciones de nuestros pueblos que hasta hace muy poco han convivido bien con la naturaleza. Bolivia ratifica su compromiso de protección y preservación de la naturaleza y sus ecosistemas. Estamos impulsando un plan de acción sobre biodiversidad al 2030 para conservar, restaurar y utilizar nuestra rica biodiversidad de manera apropiada, garantizando el desarrollo sustentable de nuestro país y aportando a la salud del planeta. Hoy más que nunca exhortamos a la cooperación y a la comunidad internacional en su conjunto a unirse al compromiso con la vida de nuestro planeta. Muchas gracias.
I would like to start with the well-known proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. COVID-19 serves as a stark reminder of the consequences if we continue to inflict unchecked damage to our environment. Humanity's impact on the climate and biosphere causes more disease outbreaks and creates new channels for human exposure. COVID-19 is a wake-up call to remind us that we are the guardians of this planet and must act accordingly. As the pandemic raged across the world, Seychelles delivered on our commitment to protect 30% of our 1.34 million square kilometers exclusive economic zone. The interests of our peoples and our planet have never been more strongly aligned. 2020 is the start of the final decade for all countries to join forces, to work hard and secure the integrated solutions the world needs. It is not the judgment of history I fear the most, but that of my children and grandchildren. I call on all leaders to rally around this cause and rapidly move towards this transformative change.
Pakistan is one of those fortunate countries which is diverse from north to south, east to west. Pakistan has 12 climatic zones, and the reason is that we have the steepest gradient. In the north, the highest mountain in Pakistan is the second highest mountain in the world, K2. From there to the sea are 2,000 kilometers. So we go from alpine climate zone to right down to the tropics. And my government has pledged to protect this biodiversity, to protect our flora and fauna. And for this, we have enlisted the help of local communities. Because Pakistan is vulnerable to climate change, we are in the top 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change. And for that, we have taken up the challenge to plant 10 billion trees. And to plant these 10 billion trees, we have enlisted the help of local communities. So by giving them jobs, they protect the forests as well as they grow nurseries so that we can achieve our target of 10 billion trees. We have also increased our national parks from 30 to 39. So in the 2 years of our government, we have increased the national parks by 9.
Hungary has never condoned fruitless debates. We have always stood up for action. Hungary pledges the following for our common future. We will stop the decrease of wetlands in Hungary that has been going on for 150 years and will increase the proportion of wetlands within 3 years. 30% of the country's territory is in a close to natural state. We intend to preserve this and will increase the proportion of protected areas. We will launch a program of afforestation. The forest cover will be increased from 21% today to at least 27% by 2030. We will eradicate illegal dumps and will continue to clean our rivers of waste coming from abroad. Hungarian rivers will leave the country cleaner than they were when they arrived. By 2025, we will phase out coal from power generation. By 2030, at least 90% of the electricity generated in our country will be CO2-free. Hungary will be climate neutral by 2050. I very much hope that every country will be just as resolute in implementing their promises as they were in formulating them. This is the only way for us to ensure a more healthier nature by 2030.
Panamá se suma al compromiso de los líderes por la naturaleza, un importante esfuerzo conjunto para revertir la degradación y la pérdida de biodiversidad que sufren los hábitats naturales. Nuestro planeta demanda acciones concretas que exigen el compromiso de todos con una visión colectiva acerca de la naturaleza y de la humanidad. Panamá tiene un compromiso histórico con la conservación de los recursos marinos y de la biodiversidad como nuestro mejor activo y patrimonio. Los mares son cruciales para nuestra economía y son también parte de nuestra cultura. Los panameños entendemos que tenemos una responsabilidad con la humanidad por la conservación de nuestra casa única, el planeta Tierra. Muchas gracias.
En este tiempo en que nuestro planeta es puesto a prueba por intensos desafíos globales que afectan nuestra diversidad biológica, debemos afianzar nuestra unidad y acción multilateral en torno a objetivos ambiciosos que la valoren y protejan. Estos desafíos no son solo intrínsecos a nuestra esencia, comprometen nuestro futuro como sociedad y como país. Para el Perú es, sobre todo, cuestión de supervivencia, en tanto somos un país megadiverso, vulnerable a los efectos del cambio climático, centro de origen y de diversificación de cultivos nativos y cuna de un pueblo ancestral cuyo conocimiento tradicional está ligado estrechamente a la naturaleza. Solo conservando y gestionando ecosistemas sanos y resilientes y aprovechando los bienes y servicios de manera sostenible, estaremos en condiciones de cumplir con los compromisos asumidos en la Agenda 2030. Por eso, reafirmemos hoy nuestro compromiso de hacer cuanto esté a nuestro alcance para asegurar la salud, la educación y el empleo, en suma, el bienestar de nuestros ciudadanos, en especial de los más vulnerables, en plena armonía con nuestro entorno natural. Muchas gracias.
1 year ago, during the UNGA, for the first time, climate and biodiversity, nature-based solutions were tackled together. It was high time because this is urgent. As a business, Danone has been engaged on these topics through Business for Nature, through the One Planet Business for Biodiversity Coalition launched in the UNGA 1 year ago, in order to make sure that we work on regenerative agriculture, on improved biodiversity of what we cultivate, and also on fighting deforestation in new ways. We can do that, and we are doing this with many companies, but we cannot do that without you. What is now needed is a fundamental recommitment by world leaders for collaboration, for multilateralism, and for transformative actions urgently for the recovery. You can count on business to be supporting this agenda. We count on you. Thank you.
Humanity is facing a difficult time. We are at a crossroads, and we must drive collective action on the natural environment, on development, and on poverty reduction. CARE believes that equity and justice must be at the heart of this joint action. Unless we put environmental justice, social justice, and human rights at the center of our strategies, then we are destined to fail. The rights of women is a particular concern to us. So many women are dependent on natural resources and biodiversity for their livelihoods and the nutrition of their families. They face different risks and are more vulnerable to the impacts of environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. We must place more attention to the empowerment of women as part of comprehensive strategies for conservation and natural resource management.
The Faith Call to Action is one of the most beautiful environmental commitments I've ever read. It's full of poetry and imagination. It asks for repentance, and then it asks for action, because no change can come until psychologically we acknowledge where we have gone wrong and therefore why we need to change. Together with our partners, the International Network on Conservation and Religion and the Beliefs and Values Initiative of WWF, Faith Invest has been working on the first action point. I quote, developing and implementing long-term values-based and scientifically informed plans to regenerate, protect, and nurture the Earth's ecosystems. And 60 major faith traditions already worldwide have said they will develop faith long-term plans. They're each committing to utilize their stakeholder role in the planet, from schools to hospitals, from welfare to investments, to thankfulness, to protect nature.
Meu nome é Bitatel Uruauau, sou coordenador da Associação Jupaú. O nosso território é importante para a nossa cultura, nossa subsistência e também para a sobrevivência da população não indígena, que utiliza as águas e respira o ar puro de nossas florestas. No nosso território, nós somos uma das principais nascentes que abastece o estado de Rondônia e outros estados da região norte. Mas isso vem sendo ameaçado por conta das invasões de madeireiros, grileiros e garimpeiros. E com todas essas ameaças, temos que nos cuidar da Covid-19 que vem sido trazido por esses invasores. Eu, na liderança de meu povo, peço ajuda à cúpula da ONU para apoiar a causa do povo Uruauau e a causa indígena no Brasil.
The first prescription of WHO's Manifesto for a Healthy and Green Recovery is to protect and to preserve the source of human health, nature. From nature we obtain the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. So it's fundamental for protecting human health. In addition to that, due to the stress that we are causing now to our environment by deforestation, by very aggressive and polluting agricultural practices, we are increasing the risk of infectious diseases, most of them coming from animals, most of them wildlife animals. So if we want to really reduce our vulnerability, the risk of having again a new pandemic or any other risk coming from the environment to our health, we need to go at the source, and the source is nature. For us, protecting nature, preserving nature, making sure that biodiversity is there is a fundamental human right to protect our health.
There we have it. We've heard from leaders from Latin America, from the European Union, from Asia, from Africa, and the message is very clear. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce this artist. Her name is Tatiana Arocha. A beautiful message there, really a moment to have introspection and just a moment for gratitude. How can we be grateful? Because some people have lost loved ones to climate change disasters, or even to this pandemic that's ravaging the planet. We have the second session with some more second lightning messages and statements from heads of state and governments, from the governments of Timor-Leste, Monaco, Slovenia, Czech Republic, the United Kingdom, Bhutan, Luxembourg, Nepal, Moldova, and also from ministers of Sweden, Belize, Finland, France, Germany, and also Italy and Mexico. So we hear more statements and the commitments to this pledge for nature and people.
Today, humanity is experiencing a climatic emergency situation. We are rich with diversity, but we are in danger of disappearing if we don't protect biodiversity. I welcome this initiative and affirm the commitment to continue together in the struggle for the sustainability of our Mother Earth. This is our home, and we are a family. Love for our children and for life demands us to behave appropriately. In Timorese culture, practicing the communities persist to reveal our ancestors, respect for the resources that nature generously offers them. As President of the Republic, in compliance with Article 61 of our Constitution, I launched the program One Citizen, One Tree, thus contributing to make our earth greener. We are deeply concerned, especially with regard to the immediate future of the states that are in danger of disappearing. But together, I'm absolutely convinced that as humanity, we will guarantee the condition for life to remain on our planet.
Biodiversity loss is an urgent threat to health, food supplies, and livelihoods across the globe, as well as cultural and spiritual benefits. Unless we take greater action to protect and restore nature, all of us will face significant declines in the vital services that it provides to us every day. We rely on a market-based system that failed to capture most ecosystem service values. This is mainly explained by the fact that many ecosystem services are public goods or common goods. Among all ecosystems, oceans and seas are particularly dear to my heart and intrinsically linked to Monaco's history. Yet oceans and seas continue to be in great danger and do not receive the attention they deserve. Together, we can set nature on the path to recovery by 2030 and transition to a nature-positive world that safeguards human health and livelihoods in both the short and long term.
Excellencies, Slovenia shares the awareness of biodiversity loss as an urgent global challenge. We put the right to clean drinking water in our constitution. On Slovenia's initiative, the United Nations proclaimed a World Bee Day, celebrated on 20th of May. My personal advocacy to environmental protection is both global and local, based on introducing public debates on climate change, establishing committee for climate policy, and supporting youth movements. I would like to reaffirm Slovenia's and my personal commitment to stop an unprecedented rate of biodiversity loss and halve climate change effects.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is my privilege to join the Leaders' Pledge of Nature today on behalf of the Czech Republic, alongside other world leaders who recognize that we are at an important turning point. It is our time and our shared responsibility to address the global environmental crisis and reverse the decline of biodiversity and ecosystem services. The COVID-19 pandemic confirmed that in time of crisis, we are able to unite and to undertake bold actions in order to protect the most vulnerable among us. Let us build on this experience and act bravely together to achieve a transformative change of our society, as it might be the only way to give our children a chance to live in the world where they can enjoy health, well-being, and prosperity. This pledge is highly ambitious, and ambition is exactly what we need now. Ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you that the Czech Republic wants to be part of the solution, not a part of a problem. Thank you.
The British government is absolutely committed to tackling biodiversity loss, and we're already taking action both at home and on the international stage. It's why we helped to shape this leaders' pledge, why I was so proud to sign it. And I'm delighted to see so many others doing the same. But let's be frank, this pledge could be only the beginning, just one step on a journey of many miles. We must turn these words into action, use them to build momentum so that we agree ambitious goals and binding targets and make the changes we need to achieve them. In short, we need not just good intentions, but real action, and we must act now, right now. We can't afford dither and delay, because biodiversity loss is happening today. It's happening at a frightening rate, and if left unchecked, the consequences will be catastrophic for us all. When a species is gone, it is gone for good. Extinction is forever. So our action must be immediate.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please accept my greetings from the land of gross national happiness. Bhutan was always guided by the far-sighted conservation visions of our kings. That is why today our biodiversity and natural heritage are pristine and intact. Our kings have set very high standard for us. We are pledged to remain carbon neutral at all times to come and keep at least 60% of the country under forest coverage. As of today, we have about 72% of the country under forest coverage, and most of it is protected by law as either national parks, biological corridors, or wildlife sanctuaries. We know it is not easy in the 21st century, but despite all the challenges, we pledge to remain on this sustainable path. That is why I'm a big fan of this global pledge of more nature by 2030. I'm convinced that through this pledge, we are on the path of achieving the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. Let us all put our hearts together to protect and help heal this planet before it is too late. We all know we owe this to our children. Thank you and Tashidele.
Dear colleagues and friends,
The current pandemic marks a crossroads in the human history. The steep decline in biodiversity is the main indicator that we are losing the wealth of our natural capital. We have to take urgent and ambitious action for the transformation of our societies. We need to change how we treat nature, how we finance, we produce and consume. The recovery from the pandemic needs to be an economic as well as an environmental and a social product, while taking into account the ecological limits of our planet and leaving no one behind. Circular economy plays a key role in this respect. It is good for business and it is good for all of us. You can count on Luxembourg's commitment and contribution within the UN, the EU, and at national level. I thank you for your attention.
Mother Earth is in peril due to excessive exploitation and abuse. We must check it before it is too late. The scientific evidence tells us a scary tale. Yet, we have not seen matching biodiversity action. It is extremely worrying. If we fail to act in earnest at national, regional, and global levels, the future of biodiversity will be doomed. We must contain human-induced depletion of biodiversity. We must make post-2020 biodiversity framework a turning point. Nepal is ranked 25th richest in biodiversity globally. Protecting nature is our culture. We are committed to it. Let's pledge for nature. Let us pledge for the future. Thank you.
Today, I'm delighted to join on behalf of the government of the Republic of Moldova this pledge of the progressive global leaders to signal the transformational systems changes and high ambition to make living in harmony with nature as a common and global reality. As the UN commemorates its 75th anniversary, the UN Summit on Biodiversity presents a unique moment in history for leaders to make the decisions that will shape our shared future. It is a great honor to announce that the Republic of Moldova is committed to contribute to the systemic and ambitious actions, to rebalance our relationship with the nature, to prioritize a fair economic recovery focused on net positive outcomes, both for the nature and climate, to support an ambitious and transformational post-2020 global biodiversity framework as a key tool to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I endorse the leaders' pledge for nature and commit to take urgent actions so that united we can reverse biodiversity loss by 2030 for sustainable development.
Dear friends, this is an opportunity for the international community to show leadership. It's time to act to save our life support system while also ensuring recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope many more will join us.
We live in a time of increasing change with a future of unprecedented challenges for humanity and our environment. We understand at a global and national level that issues such as food, water, energy security, and human health and welfare are inextricably linked to biodiversity. The magnitude of biodiversity loss that is projected to occur warns of an impending planetary emergency and demands urgent and immediate global action. Let us all seize this opportunity and take concrete actions today to create a viable future for our planet and its people.
The Arctic, with its unique nature in rapidly changing climate, is under huge threat and has severe global consequences. If we lose the Arctic, we risk losing the planet.
Nous avons besoin d'une mobilisation générale de la communauté internationale pour agir et relever les défis de notre siècle. Nous avons besoin d'un multilatéralisme concret et ambitieux pour arrêter la chute en avant, pour restaurer et respecter cette nature sans laquelle nous n'avons pas d'avenir.
Biodiversity is our life insurance. It supplies clean air and water, food, building, material and clothing. It creates jobs and livelihoods. And as the coronavirus pandemic has very clearly shown, an intact natural environment protects us from diseases and has the power to heal.
Più natura entro il 2030.
More nature by 2030 is a goal that Italy is pushing in view of the upcoming appointments, COP15 and COP26, that we will co-chair with the United Kingdom. Biodiversity and climate are interconnected challenges that require shared and global solutions.
Soluzioni comuni e globali.
Having said that, I am pleased to announce Mexico's support to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature. With this declaration, we strengthen our commitment to become part of the joint efforts of leaders around the globe to protect biodiversity, while safeguarding people's health and well-being.
Ecuador was the first country in the world to recognize that nature is a subject of rights in its national constitution. Ecuador, as one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, led the way for a necessary transition towards a new paradigm, a fundamental shift for ecological governance, one in which all ecosystems, including trees, oceans, animals, and mountains, have rights, recognizing we're all deeply intertwined. By promoting a real Earth jurisprudence, humanity can have a beneficial rather than destructive presence with the community of life. The rights of nature is becoming a fact. To date, there are more than 58 countries with existing or pending cases, and more than 180 legal provisions of rights of nature. We cannot back to normality after COVID, because normality was the problem. To build back better from COVID and deliver an ambitious New Deal for nature and people, countries of the world and the United Nations need to declare nature rights. We call for a joint action for nature.
Soy Claudia López, alcaldesa mayor de Bogotá, esta ciudad maravillosa, la capital de Colombia, una ciudad-región de 10 millones de habitantes. La pandemia del coronavirus nos ha puesto de frente a cambiar nuestros hábitos de vida, a tener otros hábitos de producción, de consumo, de movilidad, a dejar de quemar energías fósiles y usar cada vez medios alternativos de transporte limpios. Tenemos la red de ciclorrutas más grande de cualquier ciudad en el mundo en desarrollo, 580 kilómetros. Es mucho lo que estamos avanzando en cambio de hábitos de vida, en cultura ciudadana, en reciclaje, en separar en la fuente, proteger la estructura ecológica principal, tomarnos en serio, adaptarnos y mitigar los efectos de la crisis por el cambio climático, la arborización que cada vez más crece en Bogotá, nuestro propósito de reverdecer a Bogotá como parte del nuevo contrato social y ambiental que estamos haciendo para el siglo XXI.
We call on the global leaders
to agree on effective measures
to reverse nature loss in this decade and to ensure ecosystem resilience.
As financial institutions, we know that healthy societies,
resilient economies, and thriving businesses depend on nature.
So together, let's protect nature
and make sure we use our natural resources sustainably. And we will make every effort to take our share of responsibility
and contribute to the protection and restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems
through our financing activities and investments.
We therefore commit to the following.
By 2024 at the latest.
Collaborate and share knowledge.
Engage with companies. Assess impact.
Set targets.
And report publicly.
We are now in a planetary emergency for 3 reasons. First, we're coming dangerously close to tipping points that may irreversibly destabilize our planet. We're approaching many of these due to global warming, but ultimately they're triggered by the loss of ecological resilience. Second, we're running out of time. Global emissions need to be cut by half by 2030. We need to halt the loss of nature. Third, we live in an increasingly turbulent world, amplified by environmental extremes caused by climate change and nature loss. Over to you, Sandrine.
Our planetary emergency plan is calling on governments to both declare an emergency and to plan in the following way. Look at 10 commitments to protect the global commons. Ensure that we actually look at creating equitable and fair societies. Move into shifting our economies away from fossil energy and bring in regenerative and circular economic thinking. The fact is, nature has to be at the core of our planning, and we therefore call on all governments to act now.
We are living in a powerful moment, a moment where we can all commit to doing more for people and the planet. I'm proud to represent many other civil society organizations at this event. Ecosystem services provide trillions of dollars in benefits to our economies. But for too long, we have woefully undervalued and underinvested in nature. In 2019 alone, we spent $542 billion on subsidies and harmful activities that are driving biodiversity loss. We only spent a quarter of that on economic activities that benefited nature. It's time to flip the script. Together, we can change incentives and financial flows to adequately protect and restore natural ecosystems. The private sector can play a pivotal role, and governments need to pave the way to create conditions to make this possible. Only a truly united stance will help us unlock the action and resources needed to create the nature-positive, carbon-neutral world we all need.
There we have it, very powerful statement. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Achim Steiner, who is the administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, who is going to be having an open conversation, leaders conversation, which is very exciting. Over to you, Achim.
Thank you, Musonda, and how wonderful to see you live in that UNEP headquarters in Nairobi. That was my home for so many years. And welcome to the whole world that is tuning in this morning. We have, after all these commitments and recordings, now a very special treat. 15 minutes of live interaction with 4 leaders who have been at the forefront of bringing us to the point where this Leaders Pledge for Nature is today being signed across the world. Indeed, as of the 28th of September 2020, Monday morning, here in New York City, the number is now 70 governments, including the European Union, having signed up to this pledge. Many more to come, and citizens across the world perhaps beginning to believe that leadership in politics, in business, in civil society, finally taking that challenge of looking after nature on our planet more seriously. It is my great pleasure to introduce His Excellency, the President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado. And if I may begin with you, President, as somebody who comes from a country that really does not need to be reminded of the centrality of nature and also has been a champion. Having signed this pledge, what actions will you take nationally and globally in order to reverse nature loss by 2030 and promote sustainable development in the spirit of this pledge and the 10 points that it has made? President, over to you.
Thank you, Achim, and thank to all the members of the panel. Well, naturally, we need to keep the legacy and we need to preserve what was done decades ago, which is actually what has us in this position that we have protected biodiversity. But still, that's not enough. Nationally, we need to take that to the next level. And in taking it to the next level, we're talking about taking conservation and protection and management and resilience also to the oceans, as we have taken to the forest, because we see how it pays back to society in terms of biodiversity, in terms of clean industries such as tourism and others. So we need to move forward to the next level in the case of Costa Rica. But globally, we need to keep advocating because we need to share that this is not an exception. This is something that can be done elsewhere, and it pays back to societies in terms of economic growth, in terms of jobs, but also in terms of clean environment, in doing what is ethically right in terms of protecting biodiversity and nature.
Thank you so much, President. Let me immediately turn to another leader, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Your Excellency, it's a great pleasure to welcome you live, and thank you for making time to not only record a statement, but allow us to hear live from you, a country that you lead that has often been at the forefront of addressing the environmental challenges of the 21st century. Now, as Prime Minister, you have signed this pledge. What will you nationally and internationally do towards reversing biodiversity loss by 2030 and promote that integrated approach to sustainable development? Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur Steiner. C'est un plaisir de voir mes amis, le président Alvarado, la première ministre Solberg et d'autres avec nous. C'est très important aujourd'hui. I think the most important thing is that we understand, even as this pandemic has shown us how connected we are, that we need to act in concert together to protect biodiversity. That's why Canada has signed on to the Leaders Pledge. We've also signed on to the High Ambition Coalition. What does that mean concretely? It means we're committed to protecting 25% of our land and 25% of our oceans by 2025 and hitting that 30% for each by 2030. And the way we're going to do that is the way we've worked on it so far, which is working with Indigenous peoples who need to be partners in protecting the land, who understand how important it is to be good stewards of this land and these waters that sustain us. We're going to move forward on things like banning plastics, like planting 2 billion trees, moving forward on protecting our wetlands, and really bringing Canadians to connect once again to their natures. So there's an awful lot that we can do. At the same time, however, we have to realize that the world needs to move in this way too. And as I look through this list, and it's wonderful to hear well over 70 countries signed on, but I can't help but remarking that Canada is the second largest country by geography in the world. We have the longest coastline in the world. So of course, we're glad to be here as part of this, but we're the only country in the top 10 largest countries in the world who've committed to these pledges. That means all of the rest of us, and every country will find it difficult to protect 30% of their land and protect biodiversity. So it's not about who's doing better. But in terms of sheer acreage of the world, we need to get those other 9 largest countries in the top 10 to do their part and step up as well. So all of us who are part of this, we need to be working with our friends and allies around the world to make sure that Canada isn't the only country in the top 10 committed to reaching these goals. Because as much as we can all do together, we need to make sure everyone is part of protecting biodiversity and doing everything they can internally and around the world. C'est un moment qui nous rassemble, qui doit nous rassembler, et on va le faire ensemble.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier Ministre. Thank you very much, and thank you for reminding us of 2 things also, which Canada has been also at the forefront of addressing. The Indigenous peoples, very often the forgotten stewards of biodiversity, often even undermined in their capacity to protect biodiversity. They are part of that global effort. They must be an integral and active part. And thank you also for reminding us, yes, that sometimes leadership means stepping forward when others are not yet moved. But I think it is through the act of leadership that we're all hopeful that other nations will follow, especially those who perhaps have some of the biggest footprints when it comes to biodiversity, but also to the destruction of biodiversity. And thank you again for your and Canada's leadership and commitment. It is now my pleasure to turn to another country that has been at the forefront of trying to address these issues, Her Excellency Prime Minister Erna Solberg of Norway. Madam Prime Minister, may I hand you the floor?
Thank you very much, and dear friends, I think it's important to underline that protecting nature is essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's essential to deliver on the Paris Agreement, and of course, to halt the catastrophic loss of biodiversity that we are seeing. And we have to deliver on a global biodiversity framework that is strong, that fits for the challenges that we are seeing. And we of course believe that nature-based solutions should be at the center of attention in this work. And I would like to highlight 2 areas that I think is important, and they have something in common. Protecting nature is in fact also about protecting our economy. Very often people believe that protecting nature, it means that you will lose on your economy, but I believe it's the opposite way. And I think the 2 examples I have shows this. Firstly, the oceans, they are in serious trouble. We need to build sustainable ocean and a sustainable ocean economy. That means that we have to have effective production and sustainable production, but also effective protection and equitable prosperity. We need these things to go hand in hand. If not, we will lose on the jobs and the possibilities for clean, healthy, and productive oceans that we need. I co-chair the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy together with the president of Palu. We are working to try to find a new platform on this for the future, because we know that the ocean is the solution to a lot of potential areas. More food, jobs, and energy, for example. We know that new medicines might come out of the oceans, but we need them to be clean, And at the same time, we need clean oceans to be able to be delivering jobs in the future. The second thing is, of course, tropical deforestation, which is a big challenge. We must halt and reverse what we are seeing these days. Financing tropical forests is among the best investment humanity can make these days. So progress has been made. There are ambitious forest countries that are reducing their forestation rate. A coalition of countries and companies are signaling willingness to pay for these results, but we are still losing forests. That's why we should make this decade and to end tropical deforestation once and for all. This will take political will. It will require regulations and enforcement, and make objectives and ambition standards for the performance. And it also needs $1 billion annually to finance the support for such a performance. But I think this is an investment that we should take on in joint collaboration between businesses and countries, because it will pay us back. So oceans and forests, that's the two most important examples that jobs and ecology goes hand in hand, and we should make nature the solution, not the problem for us.
Prime Minister, thank you so much. And again, to acknowledge the leadership of the Kingdom of Norway in precisely these areas of oceans and forests, I am reminded also of the very bold initiative that Norway took some years ago on reducing emissions from deforestation, helping the world to establish the REDD and REDD+ mechanism, albeit imperfect as yet, but a pioneering, a leadership act in trying to connect nature and biodiversity. And let me thank you also for drawing attention to that link that the pledge is also alluding to between economy, nature, and human well-being. I often wonder what our economies would be like if they actually were to reveal the invisible economy of biodiversity. That wonderful analogy, if the world's bees and insects were to send us an invoice for all the pollination services every year, perhaps our GDP and our investments would look very differently, because at the moment, we're actually losing those services at an unprecedented rate. But let me now turn also to Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, newly appointed CEO of the Global Environment Facility. And Carlos, you and I have walked for many years alongside each other in trying to link that understanding of nature and biodiversity to that reality of the economy. Now you are leading the Global Environment Facility. It is going to be one of those catalytic funds that can help countries in the world to invest in a different way forward, to make that leaders' pledge come true. And yet we know it is not only about money. Money triggers many actions that must come. So let me ask you, seeing that pledge, having the GF sign on to it, you now taking the helm, leading up to 2030, where do you see your greatest priorities and opportunities to act on this pledge? Over to you, Carlos.
Thank you so much, Mr. Steiner, and to the Excellencies. We should be extremely happy by having the Leaders Pledge during this week. You know, Achim, scientists has told us that we need to protect 30% of the planet. And they have told us the benefits out of protecting that. But at the same time, they have told us that protecting and restoring nature up to 30% at the planet level will not mean that we will be competing where we produce our food, where we produce our energy, and where we live. On the contrary, there is a strong economic rationale behind protecting and restoring nature. Even though the investment cost may sound high, the returns will be higher in stability, security, equality, and human development. Here is where the Global Environmental Facility is ready to help governments invest in nature-based solutions for cities, the farmlands, and the oceans, and to aim high in international nature negotiations and biodiversity and climate change. So I think four things here, Achim, are really clear in order to achieve the high ambition political decisions. One, we need to protect nature as soon as possible. Then with the same pace, we need to restore degraded landscapes and ecosystems. We need to fund nature. And my fourth point, and not less important, we need to defund deforestation and pollution. So I'm very optimistic we can make these needed changes come together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. To President Alvarado, to Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Solberg, and Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, thank you. You've done a remarkable thing for three prime ministers, one CEO, and a UN official, and we've almost managed to do all of this in 15 minutes. Let me end by simply also adding my voice as head of the United Nations Development Program. In all of what we are pledging today, it is essential that we see also the human beings in that landscape, in nature, in biodiversity. Very often the rights of communities, the rights of people are precisely an integral part of also trying to achieve a reversal on the loss of biodiversity. It is my own journey from UNEP to UNDP that I see as connecting precisely these two universes so clearly. You as politicians know this perhaps more clearly than some of us who work either on the front lines of development or environment, but it is in that combination that we will succeed to make this Leaders' Pledge come true. Thank you so much for your time, and it is now my pleasure to, hand over to Lina Puerta, and we will do so with a musical interlude by Dustin Carlson. Thank you so much, all the best, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
My work is inspired by the natural world around us and by our Western versus Indigenous, Aboriginal, and ancient relationship to nature. We have so much to learn from our Indigenous ancestors and how they related to the land and the living world. What we do to nature, we do to ourselves.
Beautiful message there. What we do to nature, we do to ourselves. So without further ado, I'd like to mention to you all that we're moving now to a really exciting segment, leaders' endorsement, heads of state and government, talking about this pledge. But before we go to that video, I'm actually going to mention some countries that have actually come on board just as this session started earlier on, just a bit over an hour ago. We've got the government of Albania, Lebanon, Republic of Congo, Switzerland, Uganda, and Montenegro, who've actually signed on to this pledge. So without further ado, if you can have the video of the Leaders' Pledge, please, from heads of state and government.
Our planet is in a state of emergency.
Biodiversity loss is an urgent threat to health, food supplies, and livelihoods across the globe.
Both climate change and the loss of biodiversity have devastating consequences.
Estamos aún a tiempo de revertir la espiral de destrucción biológica en que vivimos, adoptando medidas urgentes.
The interests of our peoples and our planet have never been more strongly aligned.
We want a real common movement for change. Now is the time to act.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
And commit to take urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
Urgent actions.
So that united
we can reverse biodiversity loss
by 2030.
By 2030.
For sustainable development.
I endorse
the Leaders'
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
I endorse the Leaders' Pledge for Nature.
For sustainable development.
We have a duty to preserve the biodiversity of life on Earth, as conserving nature is not just a moral issue, but it is also a question of survival.
We must turn these words into action and make the changes we need to achieve them.
Let us all put our hearts together to protect and help heal this planet before it is too late.
We must make post-2020 biodiversity framework a turning point.
Our health and the health of our planet depend on an equitable, carbon-neutral future where we value and protect our natural spaces.
It is not the judgment of history I fear the most, but that of my children and grandchildren. I call on all leaders to rally around this cause and rapidly move towards this transformative change.
Very powerful messages there from heads of state and government. We're now going to be entering into a closing segment of this particular event. I hope you can hear me. We're now going to enter into the closing segment of this particular event. And now, without further ado, I really would like to just summarize a little bit very quickly in terms of what we've heard. We've heard from all the leaders from around the world really talking about the urgency, this planetary emergency. How do we move forward? So without further ado, I'm going to invite Ms. Elizabeth Mrema, who is the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, to really talk about this post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Why does it matter? Why do we need to move forward and really have a commitment from everybody, from each one of you on this planet? Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you very much. We have heard it loud and clear, and very encouraging statements from the heads of state and government have sent strong message of their commitment, pledge, support for action. Not only that, we've heard from the business, we've heard from other stakeholders, action today, not tomorrow. The urgency, the unity, the ambition of the pledge to halt and reverse unprecedented rates of nature loss was really an inspirational contribution to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework to be adopted next year. With the pledges, with the commitment for action now, clearly the post-2020 framework will equally be transformative, innovative, action-oriented as expected. The decisions being taken to date over the next decade will not only be on the world's biodiversity, but will be important for us all. We all rely on nature for food, for the jobs, for our health, and much more. And now, as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, let us all show how we can come together. Global solidarity, each one of us taking urgent action to tackle the urgent crisis and make it possible at a planetary scale. We've identified the problems, we know the solutions, we know how to do. Let us take action. Action are needed to achieve the living in harmony with nature in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that very strong and much needed message. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our last speaker, Inga Anderson, who is the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. Inga, in your words, how do we translate all of this into real action, particularly as we enter this final and last decade of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, thank you, Musunda, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And what Elizabeth just said was so powerful. We've seen these pledges, we've seen the commitments, now we need to move to action. So your question is, how do we do that? Well, in a way, we need to understand that we are living with these three planetary crises. And today we're talking about the nature crisis, but we all know that the climate crisis is real. And we also know that the waste and pollution crisis is real. And these three crises are fueled by what? By us, our own unsustainable production and consumption. So whilst we understand that we need to take action, we can only take that if we think about the footprint that we, humanity, put on our one planet. 14 of the 17 SDGs are underpinned by nature. So what do we need to do? The Global Biodiversity Outlook that came out just last week, the IPBES report and assessment that came out last year, speak about some big transitions that we need to take on. First, we need to redesign our food system. We all need to eat, and we need to eat in a manner that is nutritious and equitable. But we need to, of course, not do so by expanding into tropical forests, by expanding into nature. We need to do this by smart agriculture. And the solutions are there. We've seen that in many places with regenerative agriculture. Secondly, We need to minimize resource extraction and go towards circularity. Some countries, some regions are moving towards this. That is very good. We want to see more of it. Thirdly, we need to go for sustainable energy solutions. Clearly, that is good for nature and it's good for climate too. Fourthly, we need nature positive infrastructure. Invest in nature's infrastructure so that nature can be part of what protects us, both on the biodiversity side, but also on the climate side. And here, fifthly, restore degraded land. We have this upcoming decade of ecosystem restoration. Let's use that. The Biodiversity Post-2020 framework shows us that these three indivisible Rio conventions, supported by the other plethora of conventions, really hint at and point to sustainability. And we are now at this make or break moment. We have these massive stimulus packages that are going out, and these stimulus packages, yes, the first packages went out for cutting checks to people, ensuring that there was money in people's pocket, and of course to the health system. But now is the time to ensure that there are green strings attached to everything that comes out of these stimulus packages. It is not the time to go back to the old normal, the dirty and the gray economy. Now is a time where our taxpayers' money is going into green. Let's make it happen. And that includes restoration of biodiversity, nature-based solutions, sustainable agriculture, renewables, conservation, green infrastructure, smart cities. That's where we need to get to. And hearing today leaders from across the world and all these nations stepping up and pledging, I feel confident that as Elizabeth moves us and steers under the presidency of Egypt and the incoming presidency for China of the CBD towards the next 2020 framework, that we shall arrive. But let us come with courage in our suitcases. Let us come with commitment in our suitcases and with the absolute determination that failure is not an option. I thank you.
Thank you so very much for that very powerful message, Inga. We have no time to waste because it's a make or break moment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is really all we've had time for. I just want to mention that there were quite a number of videos there that were not translated either from Spanish to English or otherwise. So what we're going to do for all of them, you're going to actually have them translated, and then you're going to have the messages on the videos when they're actually posted live on YouTube and other platforms. I really want to sincerely thank you, Elizabeth and Inga, for your voices and really moving forward this post-2020 global biodiversity agenda and the messages that we've heard from all these world leaders all over the world. By the time Akim was having that open leaders conversation, we had at least 70 heads of state and government committing to this pledge. So I really would like to thank a lot of people behind the scenes who made this possible, the teams from all our partners. And you can see from that on the screen there, we've got 66 countries and counting, and still some coming in. We really want to thank WWF, our partners, and also UNDP and the Global Commons Alliance and partners, Planetary Emergency Partnership as well, and many others who've been involved in making this possible. But more importantly, I want to thank you, whoever has joined in from which part of the world that you've logged on, for your time, for your moment, to really be with us and listen in all these important messages. You are part of that solution and you're part of the action, because this planet belongs to all of us. Thank you.
We are truly humbled to be able to host such an array of inspiring leaders. Thank you so much for tuning into this session. After a short break, we will be back in action with more of Day 3 of our Nature for Life Hub, themed as Global Ambition Day. Join us back at the official UNDP Twitter account at UNDP Life or at natureforlifehub.org. We'll see you back shortly.